Support for this program is provided by the Roadway Safety Foundation, building safety into your drive.
Right now, we have more than 250,000 drivers that are over the age of 50 in Delaware, and that number is expected to increase by about 130% by 2030. And we need to make sure that our roads and streets can accommodate safely that onslaught of older drivers that are going to be needing to remain connected to their community. Safer roadways for older drivers are safer roadways for everybody.
I'm 66 years old. Let's see, legally I've been driving 50 years. I grew up on a farm, so it's probably a bit closer to 60.
66 years old, and I've been driving since 60.
I'm 68 years old, and I've been driving ever since I was about 21.
I'm 70, and I've been driving since I was 16.
I'm 70 years old. I've been driving since I'm 17.
Age 71. I've been driving since 16.
I'm 76, and I've been driving about 35 years.
I've been driving since, 62 years I've been officially with a license.
I'll be 80 years old on October 7th, and I've been driving, since 1947.
My age is 82, and I've been driving about 3 years.
I'm 84 years old, and I've been driving for 62 years.
I'm 85, and I've been driving since I was 35.
I'm 86 years old. I'll be 87 in September. And I've been driving since 1955.
I'm 87 years old, and I've been driving. I've had driver's license since I was 18.
I'm 88. I've been driving since 1937.
Delaware has the fastest growing aging population in the nation, primarily as a result of migration from other states. We're quite proud of our state of Delaware, but it does bring with it some very specific challenges as to how to support this aging population.
What we're going to see with more people retiring to our state, particularly our beach areas, are more people who are of advancing age on our roadways. Our greatest concern is their ability to drive safely and the number of crashes that they're going to get into. Older drivers make up about 17% of our driving population right now. They're involved in about 14% of our fatal crashes and 18% of our pedestrian crashes. So those are factors that we're really looking at, how to reduce their risk of being in a crash.
There is no age limit on being able to drive. There are medical limitations and requirements that you have to be able to have a certain capacity to be able to drive, but there are no age limitations. And the more advancements we make with health and technology, and people are living longer and they're living healthier longer. So there's no state or in the nation right now that has limitations on how old you can be to drive.
There are many more distractions on the road today, electronic distractions being the newest. We've always had car radios, grooming, talking to passengers, minding children, minding pets, and all of those things remain. But now we've added to the distractions with GPS devices, cell phones, both hands-free and handheld. The greater we are emotionally engaged in our distractions, be it a conversation with a passenger or a conversation on a cell phone, the greater the distraction and the danger. Not everyone has learned to manage distractions. all kinds of distractions very well. The key to driving safely is learning to manage our distractions. And while older drivers have learned to navigate a number of distractions, we have a lot of other drivers out there that are not driving safely. So we have to be prepared to react to other drivers, not only be good drivers ourselves.
You have a lot more aggressive drivers out here now. I mean, they're in and out of traffic, and they can't stay in one lane.
People on the road, I think, that disturb me more. There's a lot of tailgating and stuff like that. It's really bad. A lot of people are impatient. They want to just get ahead of you if they can, even though you're doing the speed limit.
But what concerns me a lot, the people that don't use their turn signals, for one thing. They'll just make a sudden move and unexpected.
Aggressive drivers. They make me so mad.
I have had people cut in front of me. I have had people cut me off. They see an older person and they cannot stand it. They want to get around you. They have no respect.
What bothers me is people on cell phones.
I don't think you should talk on the telephone while you're driving because it distracts you from, what you're doing.
I find it annoying when I see people who are using their cell phone and not starting up when the light changes.
You just have to be more cautious. Well, there's more traffic, let's face it, than there used to be.
From the standpoint of the Office of Highway Safety, what we try and do is address overall driver behavior. For instance, one of our goals is to reduce people who speed on the roadways so that we can reduce speed-related crashes. Drivers who are speeding and aggressive are a particular threat and very frightening to older drivers who might not be comfortable with these people going so fast around them. So we realize that as we impact overall driver behavior to make it safe, we're by its very nature going to impact senior driver behavior.
Well, I come here to the center, which is about 10 miles. I'll go down to the mall, which is about 15 for me, and I go into Smyrna. My daughter's office is there. That's about as far as I go.
Mostly just coming here, and I go pick up my two nephews who's in the daycare, and back home, and to Acme, Super Fresh, whatever.
To the grocery store, to the hairdresser at Smyrna. Go shopping, walk to Dover Downs and play my penny machines.
Hairdresser, grocery store, doctors.
We need to keep them focused on making limited trips in a safe and familiar routine, because when you take them out of their routine as they age, not being familiar with their surroundings, a lot of factors come into play. You have judgment, you have ability to make decisions. A lot of Alzheimer's patients, about 50% of them continue to drive about 3 years after diagnosis. So you have a lot of issues with memory, not remembering where you're going when you're not in a familiar situation. So those are issues that we're looking at.
Right now I limit myself, and that's my own decision, to daytime driving because I just feel I don't see as well at night.
I drive mainly during the daytime. I try to be home by dark. I don't go out in the heavy work traffic in the morning, or I'm home in the afternoon before the work traffic begins. I find it's much safer than when everyone's rushing to get to work or rushing to get home.
I have curtailed some. I don't drive as much at night as I used to. I mean, I'm like most people. It's not so much that I can't see, it's just that everybody else has their bright lights on now. And I know that that's not true, but that's the way it seems.
What I can't stand at all, and I try to avoid it as much as possible, is rain at night, nighttime driving in the rain. There's so many reflections, and you can't even make where the lanes are or anything like that. That bothers me. I avoid driving in the rain at night.
I think we use more common sense than and we don't drive as fast as some of the younger people drive.
Well, we don't speed as much, and I think we're more careful than the younger drivers.
Sure, I'm confident. Very confident in the way I drive. I'm just afraid of the other guy. I'm not afraid of my driving at all.
They are experienced. They do know the routes, especially if they've been living here, quite a while. They do know when to drive, and they take that into consideration, and they're much more cautious of new roadways and new areas and new signage. So I think we can probably capitalize on that a little bit. And actually, during our Delaware Does More for Teen Drivers, one of the ideas was maybe we should have a senior driver come in and coach a teen driver. So there's definitely, and again, I don't think the senior driver community and that demographic is in crisis. I just think that we need to make some changes to be able to adapt to their needs.
Basically, we want to ensure that older drivers have the skills and the supports to maintain their mobility, and we know as people age that is a critical piece of it. We also know that driving enables individuals to stay independent. So when seniors lose their driving capability, many times that actually promotes individuals ending up in a nursing home environment. We're very committed to looking for alternatives to arriving at that decision prematurely, if you will. So mobility and access to transportation are key issues in order to promote independence for seniors.
People drive more than they used to drive. Even when you have the same number of people are driving more and more often. So traffic volumes are increasing. Speeds tend to increase as well as years go on. So those are many of the issues we're trying to deal with as a state agency working on transportation projects. Most, if not all, the recommendations from the research that the University of Delaware did related to older drivers is beneficial to all drivers, young, medium, old, more advanced signing, larger signs, the pedestrian signals, the roundabouts, any of these recommendations. The older drivers might have more problems with these issues, but if we follow those recommendations, we certainly, there are benefits to all drivers and pedestrians, users of the road system. We're going to update our signal design manual. Probably one of the things we're going to do is set up a more of a defined standard on exactly how we do the signs, both in advance of an intersection and directly at the intersection, really focusing on getting more overhead signs that are larger letters, that are more legible to the people with poor vision, more understandable really to the general public. Pretty much our standard would be a 12-inch letter height, which really ends up with a 16-inch high sign. And that gets to be a pretty big sign. But when you compare it to everything else that's in your visual field, it stands out much better than just the small road signs on the side of the road. Here's an example of an intersection where, if you're not from the area, it's very hard to see the small street plate sign right in the middle of the road that says Christina Parkway. Today we would probably design this signal a little bit differently, and we'd have the overhead signs. That's probably 4 or 6 inch letter height. We would again go with probably 12-inch letter height. A lot of human factors research has gone into a new style of font, which is called Clearview font, which we're starting to use on some new projects. And again, the human factors research has shown that drivers can understand the messages sooner, which of course is important, because if you have to make a decision, the sooner you need to make that decision, the better. And again, it's the human factors studies have shown that it might only be a fraction of a second that you understand that message sooner than with the standard font. But when you're going 65 miles an hour, that fraction of a second can be 100 feet or hundreds of feet. One of the recommendations of the report was to standardize our signal head configurations. And throughout most of Delaware, our signal heads are pretty standard. We use 12-inch lenses. Delaware was the first state to convert all of our system to the light-emitting diode LED signals, which are brighter and use a lot less electricity. The left turn phasing we have at this intersection is it's called protected permitted left turn phasing. So if you watch the signal, you get the green arrow. This van is making their turn or making a U-turn on the green arrow. It'll go yellow, it'll go red, and then eventually you'll get a green ball. And when that happens, now, as a driver, if I'm up at the stop bar, I can make a left turn when there's a gap in opposing traffic. As a driver, I love this. I can drive at my will. I don't have a red arrow that forces me to stop. Unfortunately, in a lot of locations, we found that drivers are not making good decisions as to when they can make their turn across traffic when they have an adequate gap. So we end up with a lot of crashes. This is one of the things in the research of older drivers that has kind of stood out as a particular problem because of lower perception reaction times and worse visual acuity. In particular, a lot of times the older drivers are making poor decisions as to when they can make the left turn on the green ball. This is an example of the protected only left turn phase, where it goes from green arrow to yellow arrow to red arrow. So there's no, other than following the signal, there's no judgment needed by the driver that, you know, when can I go? I go when the signal's green, and that's it. At a regular four-way intersection, there's 32 places where you can have a conflict between vehicles, other vehicles, and pedestrians. At a four-way roundabout, there's only 8 conflict points. You know, basically one way in and one way out of each roundabout. Basically, you have one decision when you're entering a roundabout. Do I have a gap in traffic or don't I? If you're some of the left turn movements we were talking about at a regular intersection, or think about if you're making a right turn on red at a regular intersection, you need to know if your signal's green or red. If it's red, you need to know if there's a pedestrian crossing, if there's a car coming from your left, if there's a car coming from the other direction. There's so many decisions you have to make. In a roundabout, there's just one decision. Is there a gap in traffic within the roundabout or not? And when there is, you can go. The concept's not very complicated. You know, you really don't need to go to driver's ed to learn how to drive through it. If you know how to yield at any other intersection, you should know how to yield when you enter a roundabout. Nationwide, the studies have shown that the injury and the fatal crashes are reduced anywhere from 70 to 90% when the roundabouts are installed, again, with proper design and at the proper locations.
When it comes to seniors and pedestrian issues, they actually make up a fairly large number of pedestrian fatalities. Very often, their mobility is limited. They get into trouble when they try and cross a roadway, perhaps a high-speed roadway, where cars are traveling very fast and they can't make it from one side to the other pretty quickly. And that ties back to the fact that their judgment, and perhaps their judgment is related to their decreasing vision. So they're not judging the speeds of oncoming cars well. They start into the roadway thinking that another vehicle is going to stop, but a vehicle on a high-speed roadway is not going to be able to stop in time in order to avoid hitting that pedestrian. So when we're talking about pedestrian issues related to seniors, things like very bright signs, repeated messages, and audio countdown signals are very useful for them, so they understand, as perhaps they're in the crosswalk, how much time they have to get to the other side.
If you can hear it, there's a locator tone beep at this button right now that would help the visually impaired person find the button. So they would hear the tone, and then they would find the button, and then this is all tactile, so they can feel the arrow, and they would push the arrow. And if you can hear the difference in the tone now, that's indicating that the walk indication on the pedestrian signal is walk. And that different tone will stay on until the walk indication's off. Right now, on the button on the other side of the street, the tone is also there, so as they get partway across the street, that'll help line them up with where they're supposed to be going to stay on the crosswalk. When the walk indication's off, the noise will stop. It'll go back to the locator tone. And the other thing we've installed at this intersection is a countdown pedestrian signal, which that's not a visually impaired person's not going to get the benefit of the countdown, but national studies have shown that the countdown indication helps many other people understand what we're trying to explain. When now the countdown indication's on, flashing hand means that if you're in the crosswalk, you're supposed to continue on and get out. But if you haven't started yet, you shouldn't start. So now that countdown goes concurrent with the flashing hand, and that's something pretty standard that we're putting at all new and retrofit intersections is the countdown heads.
We all continue to age, and we all will become elderly in our future. We want to be able to support people to age in place with dignity and respect, and to look at it from a holistic standpoint, to engage also housing, how we develop housing, our future housing, to incorporate universal design into that aspect, to look at how we do our roadways, greater roadways as well as walkable communities, because we know that as people in the area of health, that walking and exercise actually promotes good health and well-being. So we see this as a holistic approach, but again, I'm going to kind of go back to the whole driving, because it appears to me that when people lose their license or are no longer able to drive, that is the next step in losing independence, if you will. And when we look at land development and how we have been building communities, people are more or less isolated in communities, especially as we look at the fabric of Delaware. You really do need a car many times to get around this state, and that does become problematic for the elderly who no longer drive.
There's no state or in the nation right now that has limitations on how old you can be to drive. We do on the vehicle side, however. Once a person hits the age of 85, they are granted a handicap placard for their vehicle. And the reason for that is, and it's in Delaware code, is that not only is it going to identify them to other drivers, but it also allows them to utilize the handicap parking places at areas that have those spaces.
For most individuals, driving means independence. So to take away someone's driver's privilege or driver's license, in some instances, and in most instances, is taking away their privilege. But there is a time when the individual is not safe on the road and does not create safety for others on the road as well.
I still like my freedom. I like to be able to leave home with a destination in mind and also with some alternatives, and if I want to do them, I do them.
I mean, I sure don't want you taking my license away because I'm 70, but there's a lot of these older people I don't think belong on the road neither.
Well, I don't see myself stopping unless my family decides they'll make the decision for me.
Now, I want to drive as long as I'm able to get around.
I have no family here, so as long as I can drive, I'm going to do it. And I have never had a problem.
Well, if I got to a stage where I was unable to drive or felt like I didn't belong on the road, yes, I would give up my license.
I would give up my license if I was physically unable to drive anymore.
Well, I had, just a few months ago, I had a couple of TIAs, and after consulting with my primary doctor, I decided that for the safety of myself and the public, I would not drive anymore.
My main concern about people remaining on the road is their safety. And if they cannot recognize that it's no longer safe for them to drive on that road, that we as a society and as a state government are able to support them in first that awareness, and to be able to provide an assessment for them, and to involve them in that process so they actually arrive at that decision that it is no longer safe for them to be on the road. And again, to be able to provide them options.
When I get a little older and don't want to drive, I'll take the bus or have some kind of transportation, to come and pick me up.
Well, I think we could use more bus service. That senior citizens, I think, will use. As the price of gas stays the way it is, they're going to have to use it.
In the area I'm in, there is no public transportation. So if you don't have a car, you're not going nowhere.
These drivers, their whole life has been about having a car and being able to have that independence of a car. We've gone away, nationally we've gone away from train use, we've gone away from bus use. So we really don't have the infrastructure for those people when they get to a certain age, when they don't feel comfortable behind the wheel. They don't have any choice.
All Americans deserve to age with dignity and to be able to use mobility as their key to independence, not a barrier to independence. So in recent years, we've talked a lot about our communities becoming more livable for older Americans, and a big part of that livability includes safer roadways, better signage, better driving conditions, and of course, public transportation fits in as well.
Older drivers, get the facts. Visit safeandmobiledelaware.org. That's safeandmobiledelaware.org.
Support for this program is provided by the Roadway Safety Foundation, building safety into your drive.